Hello, dear friends. Today is our next meeting, and I must say you are great. Activity is increasing, new questions are emerging. And today I would like to focus on one of the questions. I will read it out. For a number of years, I have been practicing giving up my own desires. When I got to Oleg Alexandrovich classes, at one lesson he said that it was not enough to give up desires for enlightenment. It is also important to make a condition. What about the practice of renouncing desires, if egoism is also the driving force? And what are the ways of working out the condition independently and in a group? Are there any differences, including with a teacher or without a teacher? First of all, I would like to focus on the fact that regardless of religion, nationality, regardless of belonging to any race, all people follow the same stages of evolution. It is impossible to jump over these steps, but to go up a little bit faster, it is quite possible for people who have a great sense of purpose. And it is very important to understand that all people go through the same conditions, the same steps. And each stage corresponds to a strictly defined condition. Therefore, when there is an active human development, many factors must be taken into account. Just like that, there is no desire to start doing some practices. Always up to this point, a person has already passed a certain experience. He develops his different states, and the next step is natural. Nothing happens by chance in our life. We can also pay attention to the fact that there are many types of yoga in the world, and each yoga direction is specifically engaged with a certain state, and there is also a sequence from which these different yoga systems begin, and sequentially how they replace each other. As a rule, they usually start with Hatha Yoga. This is when more emphasis is placed on interesting practices, on breathing practices. Then it moves to practices related to the development of emotional and sensual states, and then to practices related to the development of mental states. One thing steps from another, and therefore I emphasize once again, it is impossible to jump from one state to another by passing some steps. The same applies to the practices of giving up desires. And in order to begin to engage in these practices, you need to already have an internal preparation. There is a certain experience that contributes for the further progress of a person. It is almost impossible to just take and give up some states, some desires of your own. And as correctly noted here in the question, but what about when a person still has selfishness as a driving force? We have already talked in previous videos about the fact that a person is progressively developing and at each stage of his development has its own driving force. At first, it is just activity. Then, activity increases when a new driving force begins to guide a person's behavior. This is egoism. Then, at the next stage, egoism implicated in love of purity becomes to driving force. And it is precisely our humanity that is at such a stage when the driving force in the development of humanity is love of purity implicated in selfishness. And at this level, there are just a lot of different conflicts, both interpersonal and interstate. And let me remind you that so far the whole history of mankind has been a history of wars and robberies, because it was these driving forces of the development of activity that they created these conflict situations. Then these states grow into a purer love of purity, when they are already learning to gradually move away from conflicts and learn to establish competent positive relationships. And then, accordingly, humanity can breathe more freely and move on with less of these costs associated with various conflicts. If this path of human development is well understood, these are the changes of the driving forces. Then it is also becomes clear that only at the stage when a person begins to overcome egoism, it is possible to begin to engage in the practices of renouncing desires to some extent. And here also you need to keep in mind that there is not just a rejection of desires. Like any quality, this quality of desire is also transformed in the process of evolution of human consciousness. And at each stage, a person transforms himself, transforms this quality more completely. Of course, it is impossible in a short video, in a short period of time, to highlight this rather big problem that many people face. And of course, many topics that have already been touched upon and will continue to be touched upon. We will be able to explain in more detail with you in specific classes when exactly training will take place, and not only theoretical training, but also practical. And here I note that each information is gradually revealed to a person, and you can listen to the same thing 1,000 times, and it seems that everything is already clear. But there may be a 2001st time of listening, and suddenly, finally, a clear understanding of what this means appears in the mind. And that's when external information begins to turn into internal knowledge. Like any knowledge, it can already be turned into specific methodology, into specific cases. Therefore, only when the information becomes so clear that it turns into a guide to action, only then can it really be said that a person has already mastered this knowledge and he is able to practically apply this knowledge in his life. Therefore, in the future, you and I will have to clarify many more points, repeat many more times in order for this inner knowledge to arise. This is a difficult path. It does not pass quickly. It is not some kind of technique that you have mastered and can immediately apply it. Of course, there are also such techniques that you can immediately begin to apply in practice, even after the first practical training. And we will also study these techniques with you. But what concerns serious progress in the development of human consciousness, of course, this is due to time. It's due to great diligence. If a person really wants to move much faster along the path of his evolution, This is the progression through the stages of development. It gives a lot of advantages to a person, because then he is able to understand many phenomena that occur in life much earlier than other people. He can already consciously plan his life, and there is a lot of everything that begins to open up to a person in the process of his development. Therefore, I'm setting you up for active work on yourself, for active participation in classes. In order to really master this difficult, I must say, science, but very, very important for every person. And we will continue further meetings with you. And do not forget that in such short videos we cannot explain much. And only specifically in the classroom we can more in depth, more thoroughly analyze that questions that arises. And gradually a new world will open up before you. Therefore, see you again and wish you great success in the future.